and welcome to Talking Europe. I'm Armin Georgian in Brussels. In the year 2000, many Europeans were shocked when the Austrian far right entered the coalition government. The EU imposed some sanctions on the country. There was a similar feeling of shock in 2002 when the far right reached the last round of the French presidential election. But 15 years later, reactions to similar events are muted. Europeans are now used to populist rhetoric. In Western Europe, the backlash against multiculturalism is well underway. And in some parts of Central Europe, there's increasing opposition to the liberal order that Brussels represents. So there was little indignation across the EU when Austria's far right swept 26% of the vote in the parliamentary election on October the 15th. The Freedom Party is now, of course, assured more influence in the debate on migrants, borders and national identity. I'm going to be discussing some of those issues today and how they're being played out in the countries from which my guests come from today. So I'm pleased to introduce, first of all, an Austrian MEP, Eugen Freund. Hello and welcome to you. You are, of course, from the Socialists and Democrats group in the European Parliament. I'm also very pleased to welcome Alois Peterle, a Slovenian Christian Democrat. Hello and welcome to you.
Hello.
He's a member of the European People's Party, so the centre-right group here. And I'm also pleased to welcome Marco Zanni, an Italian MEP. Hello to you.
Hello,
Marco Zanni is a member of the Europe of Nations and Freedom as an independent MEP. He used to be a member of the anti-establishment five-star movement of Beppe Grillo. I just wanted to start, Eugen Freund, with your reaction to the Austrian election. Is it different? Does it feel different from 2000?
I think it is different. And you know, I hate to correct the moderator, but the EU did not impose sanctions on Austria.
Very light sanctions.
No, not even very light sanctions. It was a few countries within the EU which imposed sanctions, but not the EU as a body itself. Well, it is different because in some circumstances, because you know, most of Europe has moved to the right. So the fact that now Austria is also in this category of moving to the right does not really surprise us. I mean, this disappoints us, of course, but it does not surprise us as much.
I want to play a soundbite that you can all react to. This is from Norbert Hofer, the former presidential candidate of the FPO, the Freedom Party, talking about possible closer links between Austria and the Visegrad group of Central European countries. Let's take a listen to that.
For us, of particular importance in foreign policy are neighbouring states. I also think that Austria should make a great effort to have a good relationship with the Visegrad group of states, as well as with the countries of Central Europe in general. We have a very deep history in common with the countries of Central Europe. That's of great importance. On the level of the European Union, there is this partnership with the National Front of France. But here too you have to know these are different parties.
So Alois Peterle, what do you make of that? Do you think Austria is now going to come closer to some right-wing forces in Central Europe?
The results of the elections are clear, but I think it is important that the Austrian People's Party won, and the ideas of Austrian People's Party are European ideas, and if coalition will be formed with a liberal party,
don't call it a liberal party. It's the Freedom Party is not a liberal party.
So Freedom Party, then I expect that Austria will not join, I would say, true Eurosceptic parties in Central Europe.
I mean, yes, I would not mind if Austria would get closer to some of our neighbors. Slovenia comes in point very much so. Germany would be important, of course. Italy would be very important. But as far as the Visegrad group is concerned, I mean, so far there were no similarities that we had with the Urbanistas of Eastern Europe, and I still hope that they will still keep their distance from that kind of policy.
And the four have to agree to accept new members.
We'll come back to that point, but I just want to get your reaction, Marco Zani. Obviously, as someone who's cooperated with the Northern League, you probably have a different response to the Austrian situation.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the situation is pretty clear. And I wrote about it before the Austrian election, that there could be a sort of rebellion against EU policies by the former Austro-Hungarian Empire, because it's clear that if FPO, the Freedom Party, and the center-right party in Austria that campaigned with a program very close to the one of Freedom Party will form a government, that government and the governments of Poland, Hungary, and maybe Czech Republic in the future could create a bloc inside the council that will oppose some and will create a convergence in opposing some EU policies, for example, about migration. So it's a clear possibility, and it's a sign that European people is switching to those parties, the so-called the Eurosceptics or populists, because they are proposing policies that are creating a response to the three major crises that European people are living. So the economic crisis, the migration crisis, and the internal security crisis. So to me, that's the main reason why people are voting and giving support to Eurosceptics.
But they can all be summed up with one word, and that is anxiety. You know, there is a lot of anxiety in the population, and unfortunately, the Social Democrats in Austria, and perhaps that is true for other countries too, were not able to alleviate these anxieties, while the other parties fanned the flames of the anxiety.
You're talking about the OVP?
I'm talking about the other right of center parties, ÖVP, and also even more so, of course, the Freedom Party. Instead of, you know, talking to those people whose anxiety concerns both immigration and the economic situation, in order to understand what their fears are, you know. This was sort of left alone and left to the right-wing parties, and that is the big mistake, and particularly that they were able to fan instead of alleviating these fears.
Do you see something similar happening in your country? Do you think centre-right is also hunting on for the same voters as the far right?
We have a new party which is more radical in these terms, but I don't count it will reach a very good result. But I would say that I can live with the idea of multi-speed Europe, but I don't like Europe of multi-blocks or multi-blocks Europe, or Europe where we would be in the same boat but rowing in different directions. And in this regard, I think the idea to form a Central European Eurosceptic bloc wouldn't be acceptable.
Yeah. Do you see things developing towards a Europe of blocks rather than a multi-speed?
It's clear that the bad architecture of the European project is coming to be shown in front of people, because we are 28 after 2019, 27, very different countries with very different cultures, people, economic system, and so on. So it's clear that in front of divisive issues, as could be economic growth, migration, or internal security, there will be blocks.
I want to make this a little bit more concrete and look at one of those areas of disagreement, and just to kind of put it in a more human perspective, let's have a quick look at this report about a Eritrean migrant who was escaping the autocratic regime in Eritrea and is now stuck in an Italian facility, still hoping to benefit from the EU's relocation program. Let's have a look at that.
For months now, Samuel has been dreaming of one thing: to leave Italy. At 26, he left Eritrea to escape the dictatorship and crossed Ethiopia, Sudan and Libya, before climbing aboard a makeshift boat to cross the Mediterranean and reach Europe.
In Eritrea, I refused to join up for military service, which is obligatory until you're 60, so they put me in prison, but I managed to escape and I left. In my country, you cannot choose. It is not a democracy.
Samuel is one of 160,000 migrants who have the right to humanitarian protection and are therefore eligible for the relocation plan in the EU. In this improvised camp in the southern suburbs of Rome, about 60 people await indefinitely for resettlement in one of the countries of Northern Europe.
When I arrived, they said I could go to Finland or Germany, but time passes and I have no news. I don't know how long I'll have to wait.
Today, a volunteer legal assistant is helping them with the paperwork. The bureaucratic delays and the lack of engagement of certain European states accounts for the disappointing results of this plan launched in 2015. To date, only 28,000 refugees have been resettled, merely 28% of the initial objective.
The quota of migrants taken depends on each member state, and when a nation refuses to accept a refugee, neither Italy nor the migrant has the right to know why he is refused.
Night falls in Rome. In Italy, 13,000 migrants who are signed up for the programme are still waiting to reach Northern Europe. In this camp, some of them are getting ready to spend yet another night sleeping on the tarmac.
Just briefly, Marco-Zanni, you must be in favour, of course, of relocating these refugees because then there are less of them in Italy.
We are asking for a review of the Dublin Treaty or Dublin regulation that this is imposing migrants coming to Italy, that they will stay in Italy. But it's clear that there is no political consensus in doing this because we agreed in the European Parliament to relocate almost 200 legal migrants from Italy and Greece to other European countries, and after 2 years, just a small part of these migrants has been relocated. And it's clear that this is just one small part of the problem that is related to legal migrants, but the majority of migrants coming in Italy are illegal migrants, not escaping from wars or dictatorship, but just coming there because they prefer to stay in Europe. So we cannot take care of these people.
Well, that's a fact which has to be established when they're actually processed. I mean, until then, you don't know for sure.
I mean, I'm also agree with as far as relocation is concerned. And one has to say that, you know, there's this incredible lack of solidarity within the European countries. You know, and solidarity is not a one-way street, you know. If you become a member of the European Union, you have to oblige by a certain order. And if you don't follow this order, there must be something that we can do. And right now, there is too little in order to answer those who do not answer with solidarity on the problems that we have.
Alois Pitolio, how do you see the future of this relocation program and Slovenia's role in it?
It is clear that in the situation, the European Union is not able to protect the borders or to agree on a common policy. Then the member states try to do something to protect themselves. Of course, we have to follow our own values, principles and rules. But I usually mention also the fact that nobody asked refugees where they would like to be located or to land finally. We know that so far their idea was only Germany.
Okay, we'll have to wrap it up there, unfortunately, but it's now time to have a quick look at our segment on the fake news or real news that is coming out on European stories. This will be presented to you by Frédéric Simon, a journalist from Euractiv.
Does the EU really want to ban French fries? At first, this may sound like a hoax, you might think. In fact, there's actually some truth to it. The EU has indeed adopted at the end of July a series of guidelines to reduce the presence in food of acrylamide, a known carcinogenic substance which forms when cooking at high temperature food like bread, crisps, or indeed French fries. However, this decision made at EU level was blown up to such an extent in the media that it became misleading. The Daily Telegraph was among the first to sound the alarm back in June, According to the conservative British Daily, the EU was preparing to ban the typical Belgian practice of frying chips 2 times in order to give it its characteristic crispiness. But the practice of double frying is not without risks and can indeed contribute to the formation of acrylamide. It wasn't long before media outlets across the world jumped on the story, claiming the EU wanted to ban the famous Belgian delicacy. TV channels like CBS News in the US reported on the story, probably tempted by a sensationalist headline. But the reality is quite different. The EU has in fact given a mere recommendation which is not legally binding. And the decision will in any case not apply to small restaurants or corner shops. So Belgians can rest assured their national dish still had bright days ahead. The Agriculture Minister of Wallonia even welcomed the decision officially on Twitter.
We'll have to end it there. Thank you so much to my guests, Eugen Freund, Alois Peterle and Marco Zani. Don't go away because our one-to-one interview is coming up in just a few moments.